Emily Williams sat by her kitchen window, her gaze drifting over the familiar sights of Waynetown. Once a bustling place with families, shops, and a school brimming with children, the town had fallen on hard times. Factories closed, stores shut their doors, and each year saw more young people leaving in search of something better. Wayne had become a town where dreams withered, and optimism was a rare luxury. For Emily, every day felt like a reminder that she had little to hope for. But as a single mother, she tried to stay positive for her 11-year-old son, Lucas. One Saturday afternoon, Emily and Lucas strolled through the town's dusty main street to grab a few groceries. Just as they rounded a corner, Emily spotted a young man standing atop a makeshift stage in the town square. He was tall, in his late 20s, with a wide smile and a spark in his eyes that instantly drew people in. A small crowd gathered around him as he spoke with a booming, energetic voice. "Wayne doesn't have to be this way," the young man was saying. "Our town has so much potential, and it's time we gave it a real chance to grow. My name is Darren Clark, and I'm running for mayor because I believe we can make Wayne a better place for everyone." Emily paused. Curiosity piqued. It was rare to see anyone so passionate about Wayne's future. She and Lucas joined the crowd, listening as Darren painted a vision of renewal. He talked about fixing up the school, bringing in local businesses, and even restoring the town's small park where children once played. "We've spent enough time watching our families and friends leave," Darren said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "If we work together, we can bring life back to Wayne. We can rebuild, but I need your support. This town needs your hope." Lucas tugged at his mother's sleeve, his face lit up with excitement. "Mom, he sounds like a superhero," he whispered. Emily chuckled softly, feeling a strange sense of warmth herself. There was something different about Darren. He didn't just make promises. He spoke with a conviction that made her want to believe him. As the crowd began to disperse, Darren stepped down from the stage and approached Emily and Lucas. "Hi there," he said, smiling as he offered his hand. "I'm Darren. Thanks for stopping to listen." Emily shook his hand, surprised by his openness. "Hi, Darren. I'm Emily, and this is my son, Lucas. We've been in Wayne all our lives, and, well, it's been a while since anyone talked about fixing things up around here." Darren's smile grew wider. "I get it. I grew up in a town a lot like this, and I know how easy it is to lose hope. But I also know how much a community can change when people work together." He looked at Lucas, giving him a playful grin. "I bet we can make Wayne a town you'd be proud to call home, Lucas." Lucas beamed. "Can we really do it, Mom?" Emily hesitated, feeling a pang of protectiveness. She didn't want Lucas to get his hopes up, only to be disappointed. Yet, as she looked at Darren's determined expression, she felt her own cautious optimism beginning to spark. "Well," she replied, looking back at Darren, "it sounds like a big dream, but if you're serious, maybe we could help." Darren's eyes brightened. "That's all I'm asking for, a little faith and some hard work. We're actually organizing a community meeting this Thursday at the old library. If you two are free, I'd love for you to join us and share your ideas." As Darren moved on to greet more townspeople, Emily felt a sense of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. It was like someone had lifted a small weight off her shoulders, and the world felt a little brighter. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, Wayne Town could become more than just a fading memory. The rest of the weekend, Lucas couldn't stop talking about Darren. He insisted they go to the meeting, and as the days passed, Emily found herself just as eager. By the time Thursday rolled around, they were among the first to arrive at the library, joining a surprisingly large crowd. Darren greeted everyone with the same infectious enthusiasm, listening intently as people voiced their frustrations, dreams, and ideas. Emily shared her thoughts about restoring the park and creating a community garden where families could spend time together. To her surprise, Darren not only listened, but encouraged her to lead the project if they got the resources. "You'd be the perfect person for it, Emily," he said with a smile that made her feel seen and valued. As the meeting wrapped up, Emily glanced at Lucas, who had fallen asleep with his head on her shoulder, a content smile on his face. That night, as she put Lucas to bed, Emily realized that she too was beginning to see Darren not just as a politician, but as a beacon of hope. Waynetown had long been a place where dreams went to die, but perhaps this time the seeds of a new dream were finally starting to grow. In the weeks that followed, Darren's campaign took off like a whirlwind. Posters with his face and the slogan "Rebuild Wayne" appeared on street corners, telephone poles, and shop windows. The town square became a lively spot, with volunteers setting up tables to distribute flyers, buttons, and bumper stickers. People who once walked the streets with their heads down now greeted each other with nods and smiles, and murmured hopeful discussions about Wayne's future filled every corner of the town. Emily quickly became one of Darren's most dedicated volunteers. After her work shifts at the grocery store, she joined other residents at the campaign office, organizing events and making phone calls. She hadn't felt this sense of purpose in years, and it lifted her spirits to see Wayne buzzing with activity. For once, there was something positive to look forward to. Lucas, too, was thrilled. He'd help Emily hand out flyers on weekends, explaining Darren's ideas to anyone who would listen. His excitement was contagious, and more townsfolk began to gather at the campaign rallies to hear Darren speak. They admired his passion and found themselves inspired by his words of hope and determination. Darren spoke about revitalizing the old factories to create more jobs, building a community center, and renovating the school's playground. It seemed he had a plan for everything. One late evening, after an especially well-attended rally, Darren gathered his team, including Emily, in the back room of the campaign office. He looked tired but exhilarated. "We're making real progress," he said, smiling as he looked around at the group. "People are starting to believe in Wayne again, and it's all thanks to you." Emily beamed, feeling proud of the work they'd done. But just as she was about to leave for the night, she noticed a well-dressed man standing in the hallway, speaking to Darren in a low voice. The man introduced himself as Mr. Chambers, a businessman from the nearby city who, as he put it, saw potential in Wayne. Chambers extended his hand. "Darren, I admire what you're doing here, but big dreams need big resources." His voice was calm and persuasive, with a tone that hinted at experience in navigating the political world. "My associates and I are prepared to make a sizable donation to your campaign. With that funding, you'll be able to reach more voters, run ads, and spread your message even further." Darren hesitated, looking from Chambers to Emily, who was watching with curiosity. "Thank you, Mr. Chambers. That's very generous. But I'd need to know more about your interest in Wayne." Chambers smiled, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. "Oh, we just want to ensure Wayne's growth aligns with some of our own investments. Perhaps a few small decisions here and there once you're in office." He gave a quick wink, his voice carrying a subtle edge. "A fair trade for a promising future, wouldn't you say?" Darren's face tensed, but he nodded politely. "I'll keep that in mind, Mr. Chambers. Let's discuss it further another time." That night, As Emily and Darren closed up the office, she couldn't help but ask, "Do you think it's wise to accept support from people like him?" Chambers seems interested in Wayne for reasons that don't quite match our vision. Darren sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Emily, but campaigns need money, and if we're going to make a real difference, we might have to work with people who have their own interests. I'll be careful. I won't let anyone control us. I still want what's best for Wayne." Emily looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust his vision. But as they parted ways that night, a small seed of doubt had been planted in her mind, one that made her wonder how far Darren would go to see his dream realized, and if his dream was still the same one they all shared. As the campaign grew, so did Darren's popularity. But behind the enthusiastic rallies and hopeful speeches, quiet whispers began to spread about the large donations, the businessmen showing up in town, and the small compromises Darren seemed willing to make. As Election Day drew closer, Darren felt the weight of his campaign bearing down on him. His days were filled with meetings, speeches, and phone calls, but the excitement that once fueled him had dulled. The cheerful posters, the handshakes, and the smiles started to feel more like routine than purpose. Most unsettling, however, were his interactions with people like Mr. Chambers and other business leaders. Their donations had indeed boosted his campaign, allowing him to run ads in neighboring towns and strengthen his public presence. But they came with subtle conditions that began to pile up. One evening, Darren sat alone in the campaign office, going over his latest list of promised reforms. He looked at the crossed-out lines, things he had once pledged to the people of Wayne. Preserve the town's land for public spaces had been modified to explore business opportunities on unused land. Local jobs for local people now had a clause about collaborating with larger companies to ensure economic growth. Each change felt small on its own, but together they tugged at him, pulling him away from his initial purpose. Emily had noticed these shifts too. She still volunteered daily, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Darren wasn't the same person she'd met months ago. His speeches had become polished, but lacked the heartfelt conviction they once held. She saw him more often surrounded by men in suits, listening intently to their advice, nodding along as they spoke. When she mentioned her concerns, Darren dismissed them with a reassuring smile, telling her he was just adapting to the realities of politics. One evening, Emily decided she couldn't hold back anymore. After the day's rally, she stayed behind as the other volunteers left, approaching Darren as he packed up his notes. "Darren, can we talk?" she asked, her voice steady but concerned. He looked up, surprised by her serious tone. "Of course, Emily. What's on your mind?" Emily took a deep breath. I don't understand what's happening to our campaign. You used to talk about Wayne like it was a place worth fighting for, no matter the cost. But now it feels like you're willing to make deals that go against everything we believed in. Darren's face tightened. "Emily, it's not that simple. Running a campaign, running a town, it's all about compromise. If I don't get support from people like Chambers, we can't fund the things we need to make real changes. I'm still doing this for Wayne." "But at what cost?" Emily replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "We started this with a dream to lift up the community, not to sell it out to the highest bidder. You promised jobs and hope, but now it feels like you're more focused on winning than on helping people." Darren's jaw clenched, and he looked away. "Emily, you have to trust me. Politics isn't always about ideals. Sometimes it's about strategy. These decisions, they're small sacrifices for a larger victory. Emily's heart sank. A larger victory for who, Darren? I thought we were working for the people of Wayne, not for investors who see this town as just another business opportunity. Darren ran a hand over his face, frustration flickering in his eyes. You don't understand, Emily. I can't just hold on to these perfect ideals if I want to make a difference. Maybe you're too idealistic to see that. Emily felt a wave of disappointment. This wasn't the Darren she had once believed in, the man who had inspired her and Lucas to dream of a better future. She realized that somewhere along the way, Darren's vision for Wayne had become clouded by ambition and pressure. Maybe I am idealistic, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But that's because I still believe in Wayne. I believed in you, Darren. Without waiting for a response, she turned and left the campaign office, feeling a mix of sadness and betrayal. As she walked home, Emily realized that her dream for Wayne might no longer be aligned with Darren's. She had joined the campaign, hoping to build something meaningful, but now it felt like her hope had been turned into another bargaining chip. Back in his office, Darren sat alone, Emily's words echoing in his mind. He looked around at the campaign posters, the polished slogans, and the promises he had made, wondering if, somewhere in his pursuit of victory, he had lost the very thing that made him run in the first place. Darren Clark won the election by a landslide, and for a brief moment, Wayne Town buzzed with excitement and anticipation. People gathered in the town square to celebrate, waving signs that read, "Rebuild Wayne," and chanting his name. Emily and Lucas watched the celebrations from a distance, Emily's heart heavy with a mixture of pride and lingering doubt. Though Darren's promises had begun to feel hollow, a part of her still clung to the hope that he might find his way back to the idealistic leader she had first believed in. But as weeks passed, Darren's decisions as mayor seemed far removed from his campaign promises. His first major action was a land deal with a corporation that planned to build a chain of luxury resorts on the town's outskirts. At the announcement, Darren touted it as an opportunity for growth that would boost Wayne's economy and put us on the map. But the deal also meant selling off part of the town's farmland, a cherished space that had been in local families for generations. The townspeople were stunned. This wasn't the vision they had been promised. Many of the local farmers who had supported Darren found themselves forced to sell their land, unable to compete with the corporation's financial power. Families that had lived in Wayne for decades were uprooted, moving away in frustration and disbelief. The community that Darren had once vowed to protect was starting to unravel. For Lucas, the disappointment was deeply personal. Darren had once told him he'd make Wayne a place where kids like him could thrive, with job opportunities and a future. But now, Lucas's hope of a summer job at the local community center vanished as funds were diverted to support the new development projects. Each promise that Darren broke chipped away at the young boy's faith in him. One evening, as Emily and Lucas sat in their small living room, Lucas's frustration boiled over. "Mom, Darren lied to us. He's not the person we thought he was. He doesn't care about Wayne or about us." His voice cracked with a mix of anger and hurt. Emily looked at her son, feeling her own heartache mirrored in his eyes. She had poured countless hours into Darren's campaign, rallying her neighbors, sharing his vision, and daring to believe that Wayne could be reborn. Now she felt utterly betrayed. The man she had once seen as a beacon of hope had become just another politician, driven by power and profit. no different from the corrupt officials he had once condemned. She decided she had to confront Darren one last time. The next day, she went to his office in the town hall. When she entered, she found Darren sitting at a polished desk, his face calm and composed, a far cry from the passionate man who had once stood on a makeshift stage in the town square. "Emily," he greeted her, his voice smooth but distant, as if they were strangers. Emily took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with anger. "Darren, what happened to you? You promised us a better future. You promised us a town where families could stay, where our kids could have opportunities. Instead, you've sold us out to corporations and wealthy investors. This isn't what we worked for." Darren sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Emily, things aren't as simple as they seemed during the campaign. Wayne needed funding, and I found a way to get it. We'll see growth, just in a different way." "But at what cost?" Emily replied, her voice rising. "You're tearing apart the very community you claim to care about. People are losing their homes, their jobs, their futures. Was that really worth it?" Darren's eyes hardened, and he shrugged dismissively. "This is progress, Emily. Sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Not everyone will understand, but in the end, Wayne will benefit." Emily felt a surge of fury. She had once looked up to this man, believed in his vision, but now she saw him for what he truly was, someone who had lost sight of his own ideals, consumed by power and the allure of wealth. With tears stinging her eyes, she turned away, her voice barely a whisper. "You were supposed to be different, Darren, but you're just like all the rest." As she left his office, Emily felt the weight of betrayal settle heavily in her chest. The dream that had once brought the town together had been shattered, and with it, her faith in the man she had thought would save Wayne. The protests began small, with a handful of townspeople standing outside the town hall holding homemade signs. Word spread quickly, and each day the crowd grew larger, fueled by anger and a shared sense of betrayal. Emily was at the forefront, her face determined as she chanted alongside her neighbors, demanding that Darren listen to their voices. They called for a return to the promises of community and fairness, the very ideals that had first sparked their hope. Darren, however, remained unfazed. From his office window, he watched the protests with an indifferent gaze, distancing himself from the pleas of the people he once claimed to represent. To him, the cries for justice were inconvenient distractions from his new reality, one in which he prioritized deals and figures over the lives of those who had put him in power. He rarely ventured outside his office, avoiding the people who had once been his supporters. Emily felt a profound sorrow, not only for her own disappointment, but for the community that had trusted Darren's words. She saw the faces of the people around her, friends, neighbors, families who had sacrificed their time and faith for a cause that had turned hollow. As the days wore on, it became clear that Darren's path was set, and no amount of protest would change his mind. One evening, after a particularly intense day of protesting, Emily sat with Lucas on a hillside overlooking Wayne. The town lay quiet in the fading light, the same town she had called home her entire life. She looked at Lucas, who had been her motivation through every struggle, and a sense of clarity began to wash over her. "Lucas," she said softly, "we've done all we can here. We fought for our town, but sometimes things don't go the way we hope." Lucas looked up at her, his eyes reflecting a maturity beyond his years. "So, what now, Mom? What do we do if Wayne isn't the place we thought it could be? Emily sighed, a bittersweet smile forming. We start again, somewhere new, somewhere that gives us a fresh chance to build a life without depending on empty promises. Dreams should make us stronger, happier, not serve someone else's greed. The next day, Emily began packing her things, telling her friends and neighbors of her decision to leave Wayne in search of a new beginning. Many understood, and though they were sad to see her go, they respected her choice. Some of them even talked about leaving, realizing that staying meant continually being at the mercy of leaders who failed them. As she loaded the last of her boxes into the car, Emily took a final look at the town she had once believed could change. She saw Darren's posters, peeling and fading, remnants of a vision that had died in the pursuit of power. But instead of bitterness, she felt a quiet resolve. She had learned that dreams needed careful tending, and following them blindly could lead to heartache and disillusionment. As they drove away from Wayne, Emily glanced at Lucas, who gazed out the window, lost in thought. She took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Remember, Lucas," she said, "never let anyone take your dreams and turn them into something that doesn't belong to you. Find your own way and be careful of those who sell easy answers wrapped in promises." And with that, they left Wayne behind, heading toward a new chapter, a reminder that true hope isn't found in empty words, but in the quiet courage to forge a path that is authentically one's own.